Get rid of it, I don't want a child, said the billionaire CEO. 3 years later, seeing the triplets made him freeze. Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. The envelope landed on the marble countertop between them like a verdict. Thick, cream-colored paper that probably cost more than Isabel Rivera's monthly rent, sealed with the embossed logo of Castellano Legal Group. She stared at it, her hands pressed flat against the cool stone to stop them from shaking. The penthouse kitchen felt like a tomb now, all that imported Italian marble and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline suddenly suffocating. She had practiced this conversation for a week, rehearsing different approaches in the mirror of her cramped studio apartment. Imagining his surprise dissolving into something softer, maybe even joy, maybe tears, maybe his arms around her, his voice rough with emotion as he whispered that everything would be okay. Instead, Dante Castellano stood with his back to her, staring out at the city spread below like he owned every light, every building, every life contained within his view. His silence was a physical weight crushing her chest, making it hard to breathe. Inside is a cashier's check for $200,000. His voice was flat, corporate, the same tone he used when firing executives who failed to meet quarterly projections. It covers the procedure, 6 months of living expenses, and relocation costs. Enough to start over somewhere far from here. Somewhere that makes sense for both of us. Isabel pressed her palm against her stomach, still flat beneath her sweater, but holding 3 lives she didn't even know existed yet. The doctor's confirmation had come just yesterday, the word triplets delivered with clinical efficiency that made the miracle feel almost mundane. I thought you'd want to know. I thought after all those nights when you talked about feeling empty, about building something that mattered beyond profit margins, that maybe. You thought wrong. Dante turned then, and his face belonged to a stranger. Gone was the man who traced constellations on her skin in the darkness and whispered about feeling trapped in a life he never chose. This was the heir to Castellano Industries, the prodigy who transformed his family's failing real estate empire into a multinational conglomerate before his 30th birthday. I have obligations, Isabel. My mother's political campaign depends on my image. The board expects me to marry Valentina Moretti. The merger with Moretti Holdings is contingent on that alliance. I can't afford complications. Complications. Isabel repeated the word like it burned her tongue. That's what this is to you. That's what I am. Don't make this about emotion. Dante's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his perfectly shaved skin. We were always clear about boundaries. I never promised you permanence. I never suggested this was anything more than what it was. The lie hung between them, so blatant that Isabel nearly laughed. She remembered every whispered confession, every vulnerable moment when he let the mask slip and showed her the boy beneath the billionaire. The one who resented his inheritance, who felt suffocated by expectations, who claimed she was the only real thing in his manufactured existence. For 11 months, she had believed the performance, had mistaken his temporary escape for genuine transformation. You told me you loved me. Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for the weakness, for giving him the satisfaction of seeing her break. 3 weeks ago, in that hotel in Paris, you said I was the best thing that ever happened to you. I said what you needed to hear. Dante's words were surgical, precise cuts designed to sever cleanly. You're beautiful, Isabel. You made me feel human for a while. But this was always going to end. I'm marrying Valentina in 4 months. The engagement announcement is scheduled. The prenuptial agreements are signed. A child, children, would destroy everything. Children. Isabel stood, her legs barely supporting her weight. You keep saying it like they're objects, problems to be solved. There are heartbeats inside me, Dante. 3 of them. 3 lives. 3 complications. He picked up the envelope, holding it toward her like a transaction, a deal to be closed. Take the money. Do this before it becomes something neither of us can handle. You're 26, Isabel. Your whole life stretches ahead of you. Don't ruin it over a mistake. The cruelty of his dismissal finally pierced through her shock, igniting something fierce and protective in her chest. Isabel looked at this man she had loved, really looked at him, and saw the truth she had been avoiding. He had never been hers. The vulnerability had been performance. Everything between them had been borrowed time, stolen moments, a fantasy she had confused with reality because she was desperate to believe someone like him could actually love someone like her. "I won't do this for you." She left the envelope on the counter, her voice steady despite the chaos screaming inside her skull. "Whatever happens next is my choice. My life. My future." Dante's expression flickered, something almost like regret crossing his features before the corporate mask settled back into place. "You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, my lawyers will contact you with a formal agreement. Take the help, Isabel. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The only thing hard here is understanding how I ever believed you were capable of loving anyone but yourself." Isabel grabbed her coat, her movements deliberate despite the earthquake happening inside her body. "You're going to regret this, Dante. Not because I'll force you to pay, but because one day you'll realize you traded everything real for a life that was always a prison. Get out." His voice was ice now, all pretense of civility abandoned. "Get out before I call security." Isabel walked to the elevator on legs that felt disconnected from her body, her boots clicking against polished floors that had once seemed magical when she was foolish enough to believe in fairy tales. The doors closed on Dante's silhouette, still standing at those windows, still choosing his empire over her, still proving that some men were raised to value power over people. The lobby was empty at this hour, just the night concierge who nodded politely, unaware that her entire world had just imploded 60 floors above his desk. Isabel pushed through the revolving doors into the November air, snow beginning to fall in thick flakes that caught in her hair before melting against her flushed skin. She walked for blocks, maybe miles, barely aware of direction or destination. Her mind replaying every moment, every lie, every promise that had been calculated manipulation. The pregnancy test in her purse felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. This small plastic stick that had revealed not just new life but the truth about the man she had loved. Finally, Isabel stopped on a corner, snow swirling around her in dizzying patterns, her breath creating clouds that dissipated into darkness. She pressed both hands against her stomach, feeling nothing yet but knowing everything was different now. Dante had given her a choice, thinking his money could erase consequences, could make 3 lives disappear like they were inconvenient footnotes in his carefully scripted existence. But Isabel had already made her choice the moment she saw those positive tests lined up on her bathroom counter, 3 confirmations that her body was doing something extraordinary. She chose life over convenience. She chose love over money. She chose the terrifying unknown over the comfortable lie. "We're going to survive this," she whispered to the lives growing inside her, her voice fierce despite the tears freezing on her cheeks. "I don't know how yet, but we will. And one day, he's going to see what he destroyed, and it will break him." The snow fell harder, covering the city in white, washing away the footprints of the woman who had walked into that penthouse kitchen, leaving someone new in her place. Someone stronger. Someone who understood that the hardest choices were often the only real ones. Isabel vanished the way morning fog vanishes, gradually, then all at once, leaving behind nothing that connected her to Dante Castellano's world except absence. The studio apartment he had never visited sat empty after 2 weeks, her landlord finding the key on the kitchen table with 3 months' rent paid in advance. No note. No forwarding address. Just the hollow echo of a life deliberately erased. Her position at the Art Conservation Lab ended with a brief email, professional and cold, citing family emergencies that required immediate relocation. Her supervisor tried calling, worried about the brilliant young restorer who had brought damaged paintings back to life with almost magical skill, but Isabel's number was disconnected, her social media deleted, her entire digital existence scrubbed clean. Friends who knew her as Dante's girlfriend found themselves blocked, their messages bouncing back into the void. Isabel had systematically severed every thread that could lead him back to her, understanding that men like Dante Castellano didn't accept rejection. They hunted. They pursued. They used their resources to reclaim things they decided they wanted, regardless of whether those things had ever been theirs to claim. The bus ride to her brother's house took 14 hours, winding through landscapes that transformed from urban sprawl to rural farmland. Each mile putting distance between her and the life that had detonated. Isabel pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching small towns blur past, feeling like she was shedding a skin, becoming someone new out of survival instinct. Her phone buzzed relentlessly during the first 3 hours, Dante's name flashing across the screen with increasing frequency. She imagined him in his office, surrounded by glass and steel and expensive art that meant nothing, trying to assert control over a situation that had already slipped through his perfectly manicured fingers. Finally, she powered the device down and dropped it into a trash can at a rest stop, severing the last thread connecting her present to her past. Miguel's farm appeared exactly as Isabel remembered from childhood visits. A sprawling property 3 hours from the nearest city, weathered red barns surrounded by fields that stretched toward mountains in the distance. Her brother stood on the porch before she even reached the gate, as if some instinct had warned him that his baby sister was coming home broken and desperate for shelter. Izzy. He pulled her into arms that smelled like earth and hay and safety, his voice rough with concern. Jesus, you look like you haven't slept in days. Isabel meant to explain, to find words that would make sense of the catastrophe. Instead, she collapsed, her body folding against his solid presence, sobs tearing through her chest like they would split her open from the inside. Miguel held her through it, making soft sounds of comfort, the same sounds he'd made when they were children and their father left, teaching them both that men could abandon the people they claimed to love without looking back. The guest room became Isabel's sanctuary, a small space with wooden beams and windows overlooking fields that changed color with the seasons. That first night, lying in darkness with silence so complete it felt like a physical presence, Isabel let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. Dante's betrayal wasn't just about the pregnancy. It was about discovering that the person she loved had never existed. That every whispered confession had been theater. That she had been so desperate to believe in transformation that she ignored every warning sign screaming that men raised in dynasties don't choose love over legacy. The first doctor's appointment revealed the truth that would reshape everything. Isabel lay on the examination table in the small-town clinic, gel cold on her stomach, watching the ultrasound screen with detached curiosity. The technician's expression shifted from routine to surprised, and Isabel's heart dropped into her stomach. Is something wrong? Her voice came out small, terrified of all the ways bodies could betray their inhabitants. Wrong? No, honey. The technician turned the screen, pointing to 3 distinct shapes, 3 separate heartbeats pulsing in synchronization. You're having triplets. 3 healthy babies, all developing beautifully. Isabel stared at the screen, unable to process what she was seeing. 3 lives. 3 futures. 3 souls that Dante had wanted her to erase with money and cold commands. The magnitude crashed over her, not just the practical impossibility of raising 3 children alone on non-existent income, but the cosmic irony of it all. Of course her body would do something extraordinary. Of course nothing about this would be simple or manageable or anything resembling normal. Are you okay? The technician's voice carried gentle concern. I know triplets can be overwhelming news. I'm okay, Isabel heard herself say, though she had no idea if it was true. I'm going to be okay. The pregnancy was brutal in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her body stretched and ached, exhaustion settling into her bones like permanent weight. Morning sickness lasted all day, every day, for months. Simple tasks like standing to cook dinner or walking to the mailbox became monumental efforts that left her gasping. Miguel worked the farm while juggling 2 part-time jobs in town, coming home exhausted but always ready to help Isabel through another crisis, another panic attack, another moment when the impossibility of everything threatened to drown her. Isabel enrolled in online courses for digital illustration, determined to build skills that could support her family, to become someone who didn't need rescue or charity. Late at night, when the babies kicked and rolled inside her like they were fighting for space, she worked on assignments, teaching herself programs and techniques, building a portfolio from nothing. The work gave her purpose beyond survival, reminded her that she was still capable of creating beauty even in the midst of chaos, that Dante hadn't stolen her talent along with her trust. She talked to them constantly, these 3 lives sharing her body, telling them stories about the mountains and her grandmother who taught her that strength wasn't something you found but something you decided to be. She never mentioned their father, as if silence could erase him from their narrative, though sometimes she woke from dreams where Dante was there, watching her belly grow, his face twisted with regret so profound it looked like grief. The labor came early, 32 weeks, her body deciding it had carried enough weight, had stretched far enough, had given everything it could give. Isabel was terrified as Miguel rushed her to the hospital, contractions tearing through her like her body was splitting in half, fear mixing with pain until she couldn't distinguish between them. The world blurred into agony and panic and bright lights, voices telling her to push, to breathe, to hold on just a little longer. Then the first cry pierced through everything, sharp and indignant and perfect. Then the second, softer but just as insistent. Then the third, a wail that sounded like fury at being forced into the cold world. They placed 3 tiny humans on Isabel's chest, warm and impossibly real, and nothing else in the universe mattered anymore. Not Dante's betrayal. Not her demolished dreams. Not the terrifying future stretching ahead. Just these 3 perfect beings who chose her, who needed her, who were hers to protect and love and raise. What are their names? A nurse hovered nearby, clipboard ready. Isabel looked down at 3 perfect faces, 3 lives she had chosen, 3 souls that were hers. Matteo, she touched the first baby's dark hair. Sophia, she whispered to the quiet one with serious eyes. And Gabriel, she smiled at the smallest, who was still crying like he had opinions about this whole situation. The first year passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant needs. 3 infants with different temperaments requiring different approaches. Matteo was demanding and loud, letting the world know immediately when something wasn't right. Sophia was watchful and calm, almost eerily self-sufficient. Gabriel was sensitive and clingy, needing constant reassurance that he was safe and loved. Isabel learned to function on fragments of sleep, to feed 3 babies while barely conscious, to somehow keep everyone alive when she felt like she was dying. Miguel became her lifeline, teaching her how to manage chaos, how to find moments of joy in the exhaustion, how to remember that this impossible situation was also miraculous. They developed routines, systems, ways to survive each day and then the next. Isabel's illustration business grew slowly, word of mouth bringing clients, her work improving as she found her voice, her unique perspective shaped by struggle and survival. By their 3rd birthday, the triplets had become whole people with distinct personalities that filled every corner of the farmhouse. Matteo was fierce and protective, always stepping between his siblings and anything frightening, his confidence sometimes terrifying in its absoluteness. Sophia was quiet and observant, seeing things other children missed, her drawings already showing talent that seemed to come from nowhere. Gabriel was gentle and emotional, crying at sad stories, collecting treasures from nature, giving hugs that felt like he wanted to merge souls. Isabel had built a life from destruction, had survived what should have destroyed her, had created beauty from betrayal. She rarely thought about Dante anymore, had trained herself to stop wondering if he ever regretted his choice, if he ever thought about what he had thrown away. The anger had cooled into something else, not forgiveness, but absence, an empty space where he used to live in her thoughts. Then the email arrived. An invitation to exhibit at a major art gallery in the city she had fled. An opportunity that could transform her small freelance business into something real and sustainable. Isabel stared at the screen, her cursor hovering over the delete button, knowing that going back meant facing ghosts, risking the peace she had fought so hard to build. But she had 3 children who deserved more than survival, who deserved a mother chasing dreams instead of hiding from the past. Isabel hit accept on the invitation, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and determination, understanding that some confrontations were inevitable, that running forever wasn't the same as healing. The city had transformed in 3 years. Or perhaps Isabel was the one who had transformed, and the city was just different through her new eyes. She left the triplets with Miguel, her first separation from them since birth, and the absence felt like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Every instinct screamed to go back, to protect them from a world that felt too dangerous, too full of men like Dante who destroyed without conscience. But Miguel had practically pushed her onto the train, insisting she needed this, needed to remember who she was beyond mother, beyond survivor. The hotel was in the arts district, deliberately chosen for its distance from the financial towers where Dante lived his separate life. Isabel unpacked in a room that felt too quiet, missing the chaos of 3 voices demanding her attention simultaneously. She had prepared for this exhibition like it was war, researching attendees, planning her approach, determined to find collectors who could elevate her work beyond small commissions and local sales. The first day was overwhelming. Hundreds of artists competing for attention, everyone polished and confident in ways that made Isabel feel like an imposter. But she pushed through the discomfort, forcing herself to network, to pitch, to pretend she belonged in these spaces. By the second day, she had found her rhythm, discovered that her work spoke for itself, that survival had given her a perspective most of these privileged artists could never access. Marcus Chen appeared like an answered prayer, a gallery owner from San Francisco who stopped at Isabel's display and actually looked, really studied each piece instead of offering polite glances most people gave. He was sharp and funny, his success story involving multiple failures before he finally broke through, and he told Isabel that talent was common but perspective was priceless, and she had both. "I need an artist for a major installation." Marcus pulled out his phone, showing Isabel concepts for a public art project. Something that captures resilience, beauty emerging from struggle, art as survival itself. "Can you do that?" Isabel's heart raced, recognizing the opportunity, the door opening. "I can do that." They talked for hours, the conversation evolving from business to personal. Marcus sharing his own story of building something from nothing, of refusing to let failure define him. By the time they parted, Isabel had a contract that would pay more than she had earned in the entire previous year, validation that she was actually talented, that she could build a career instead of just surviving. Walking back to her hotel that evening, Isabel felt something shift inside her, a recognition that she had not just survived but was beginning to thrive. The street was crowded with people heading to restaurants and theaters, the city alive with possibility, and she was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the commotion ahead until she was almost through it. Cameras flashed. Security guards created a perimeter. And then she heard his voice, that familiar cadence that still occasionally haunted her dreams. Dante Castellano stood outside an upscale restaurant, surrounded by men in expensive suits, their laughter sharp and exclusive, celebrating something that probably involved billions of dollars and decisions that affected thousands of lives. He looked older, harder, his hair touched with silver that somehow made him more distinguished instead of aging him. The suit he wore probably cost more than Isabel's annual income, his watch catching light like captured stars on his wrist. This was his world, power and privilege and casual wealth. And Isabel was suddenly aware of her second-hand dress, her practical shoes, the distance between their universes. She should have kept walking, should have disappeared into the crowd before he noticed her. But something made her freeze. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the success still glowing in her chest from Marcus's contract. Maybe it was just exhaustion from running. Their eyes met across 20 feet of crowded sidewalk, and Isabel watched recognition hit him like a physical blow. Dante's face drained of color, his hand gripping the doorframe for balance, his mouth opening but no sound emerging. The men around him continued talking, unaware of the earthquake happening in his head. And Isabel felt savage satisfaction at his shock, his obvious distress, proof that she had haunted him the way he had haunted her. For a moment, neither of them moved, caught in the gravity of their shared history. Isabel could see questions forming in his eyes, calculations about what to say, how to approach this, whether his colleagues were watching. Before he could speak, before he could shatter the piece she had worked so hard to build, Isabel turned and walked away. She didn't run, refused to give him that satisfaction, just moved with deliberate purpose, her heels clicking against concrete, her spine straight despite the panic flooding her system. One block, then another. Then she turned a corner and collapsed against a building, gasping for air like she had been underwater, her hands shaking so hard she had to press them against brick to make them still. The exhibition ended the next day, and Isabel fled back to the farm like a refugee escaping war. The triplets mobbed her the moment she walked through the door, their voices overlapping in demands for attention, stories tumbling out about their adventures with Uncle Miguel. Isabel held them all at once, breathing in their familiar smell, feeling her heart settle back into its proper rhythm. "How was it?" Miguel asked later, after the children were asleep. "Good. Really good." Isabel pulled out the contract with Marcus, proof that the trip had been worth the terror. "But I saw him, Donde. Just for a second." Miguel's expression tightened. "Did he approach you?" "No. I walked away before he could." Isabel stared at the contract, feeling the accomplishment dim under the weight of that encounter. "I thought I was over it, Miguel. I thought I had moved past all that anger and hurt. But seeing him brought it all back like it happened yesterday." "Healing isn't linear, Izzy." Miguel squeezed her hand. "Sometimes old wounds reopen just to remind us they existed. Doesn't mean you haven't healed. Just means you're human." Isabel wanted to believe that, wanted to think the encounter was just a blip, meaningless in the context of her new life. But 2 weeks later, standing in the town park while the triplets played on the swings, she felt eyes on her back with such intensity that her skin prickled with awareness. She turned slowly, already knowing what she would see. Dante stood by the park entrance, staring at Matteo and Sophia and Gabriel with an expression she couldn't decipher. He had found her somehow, had tracked her down, had invaded the safe space she had built far from his reach. The children were laughing, completely oblivious to the man watching them, to the biological connection neither side acknowledged. Matteo's hair caught the afternoon sun, dark curls bouncing as he pumped his legs on the swing. Sophia sat in the sandbox, drawing patterns with a stick, her concentration absolute. Gabriel ran between them, his joy infectious, his innocence complete. Isabel watched Dante watching them, saw him do the math, count backwards to that night in the penthouse when he had tried to erase them with money and cold words. His face was a study in devastation, realization crashing over him in waves, understanding what he had lost, what he had thrown away, what he could never have back. Matteo noticed his mother's sudden stillness and ran over, his small hand gripping Isabel's leg, his dark eyes suspicious of the stranger making his mother's face do scary things. "Who's that man, Mama?" "Nobody." Isabel's voice came out harder than she intended. "He's nobody important." Dante took a step forward, his mouth opening, and Isabel finally found her voice sharp enough to cut. "Don't." The word stopped him cold. "Don't you dare come near them. Don't you dare think you have any right to look at them, to know them, to exist in their world. You made your choice 3 years ago. Live with it." She grabbed Matteo's hand, called to Sophia and Gabriel, and walked away from the park, from Dante, from the confrontation she wasn't ready to have. Behind her, she could feel his presence, could imagine his face twisted with emotions he had no right to feel, could sense the beginning of something she had feared since the moment she chose to keep them. Dante Castellano had seen his children, and that changed everything, whether Isabel was ready for it or not. Dante sat in his office long after everyone else had gone home, the city lights below blurring through tears he refused to acknowledge. The photograph spread across his desk shouldn't exist, should never have been taken, but he had needed to know, needed visual confirmation of what he suspected the moment he saw Isabel in that crowd. 3 children. Triplets. 2 boys and a girl. Their faces a perfect blend of Isabel's beauty and his own features, undeniable proof that his attempt to erase them had failed spectacularly. Matteo with his mother's determined chin. Sophia with his sister's artistic intensity, the sister who died when Dante was 12, whose loss had taught him that loving people meant risking devastating pain. Gabriel with the gentle smile Dante had lost somewhere between childhood and corporate warfare. The private investigator's report was thorough, clinical in its detail. Isabel Rivera, living with her brother on a farm 3 hours from the city, running a small illustration business, raising 3 children alone on an income that barely covered necessities. No child support. No father listed on birth certificates. No connection to the Castellano name except the DNA coursing through 3 small bodies Dante had tried to wish out of existence. His engagement to Valentina Moretti had been exactly what was promised, a merger of fortunes wrapped in the pretense of romance. They maintained separate lives, coming together only for public appearances and business discussions. Valentina focused on her fashion empire, hosting charity events that enhanced their social standing, while Dante buried himself in work, expanding Castellano Industries across international markets, earning his father's grudging approval before the old man died and left Dante everything. They had no children, would never have children. An agreement made before the engagement that Dante had accepted with relief. Valentina had no interest in motherhood, her ambitions centered on building her own dynasty, and Dante had convinced himself he was equally disinterested. Except now he knew that 3 children existed in the world, his children, growing up without him. And the emptiness he had always attributed to success suddenly had a name. The guilt was suffocating, not just for what he did to Isabel, but for what he had stolen from himself. 3 years of birthdays and first words and milestones he could never recover. 3 lives that didn't know his name, didn't know they had a father who lay awake at night staring at their photographs like a man possessed. His mother would have told him to forget it, to let sleeping disasters lie, to protect the family name from scandal. But his mother had died 2 years ago, taking with her any remaining voice telling Dante that appearance mattered more than authenticity. The empire felt hollow now, the success meaningless. Every achievement tainted by the knowledge that he had sacrificed real love for corporate approval, had chosen legacy over life, had become exactly what his father wanted instead of who he actually was. Dante hired a lawyer, then fired him when he started talking about custody battles and parental rights, strategies that would destroy Isabel and traumatize the children he supposedly wanted to know. He tried to talk himself out of this obsession, to convince himself that showing up now would only cause damage, that he had forfeited every right when he told Isabel to get rid of it. But the voice in his head insisting he deserved to know his children was louder than reason, louder than conscience, louder than the warning signs flashing that this was about his needs and not their well-being. Dante couldn't see past his own sudden desire for fatherhood, couldn't examine why 3 years of indifference had transformed into desperate need, couldn't question whether disrupting their peace was cruel or just selfish. He drove to the farm without a plan, telling himself he just wanted to see where they lived, to understand their world, to somehow make sense of the life he had rejected. The property was beautiful in its simplicity, a red barn surrounded by fields, children's toys scattered across a porch, evidence of life and love and everything he had traded for cold success. Dante watched from his car as Isabel herded the triplets toward a van, their voices loud and chaotic, her face tired but content in ways he had never achieved. She looked different, stronger, more herself than she had been during their relationship. Back then she had been soft and eager to please, molding herself to fit his world. Now she moved with authority, completely comfortable in her role, a woman who had survived his betrayal and built something beautiful from the wreckage. He followed them to the park, staying at a distance, watching the children play with an intensity that probably looked disturbing. Matteo was fearless on the swings, pushing himself higher than seemed safe, his laughter carrying across the playground. Sophia sat apart, focused on her drawings, creating patterns that showed artistic talent beyond her age. Gabriel bounced between his siblings, needing connection, seeking approval, his sensitivity obvious even from a distance. When Isabel's eyes met his across the playground, Dante felt the full weight of his choices crash down. The hatred in her face was pure and justified, and underneath it was fear, terror that he was there to take something else from her, to steal the children she had raised alone. Dante wanted to explain that he just wanted to know them, to be part of their lives, to somehow undo the devastation he had caused. But her command to stay away was absolute, her rejection complete. He stood there after they left, frozen in the spot where he had first seen his children up close, understanding that DNA didn't grant rights, that biology didn't erase abandonment, that he had destroyed any claim to fatherhood when he chose his empire over their existence. But Dante was his father's son in the worst ways, trained to fight for what he wanted, regardless of whether he deserved it. The voice telling him to walk away, to leave them in peace, to accept that some mistakes couldn't be fixed, was drowned out by possessiveness and entitlement and the arrogant belief that wanting something badly enough made it his. He called a different lawyer, asked about his options, his rights, his strategies for inserting himself into their lives. She warned him about optics, about judges who favored primary caregivers, about how his wealth might work against him in custody disputes. Dante listened but didn't hear, already planning his approach, already deciding that gradual infiltration would work better than legal warfare. That night, lying alone in his penthouse while Valentina traveled for business, Dante made a decision that would shatter multiple lives. He would win his children back, would prove he could be a father, would earn a place in their world, even if Isabel hated him for it. The fact that this was about filling the void in his own life rather than serving their needs never occurred to him. Or if it did, he pushed the thought away as inconvenient truth. Dante Castellano had seen what he was missing, and he had never been taught how to let go of things he wanted, even things that had never been his to claim. Dante began appearing everywhere Isabel went, a ghost that wouldn't stay buried, a presence that infected her safe spaces with anxiety and rage. At the farmer's market, he materialized near the produce stands, offering to carry her bags when her arms were full of children and groceries. At the library, he browsed shelves near where Gabriel picked out picture books, his expensive clothes ridiculous against the worn carpet. His awkwardness with the space painfully obvious. This is harassment. Isabel confronted him after the third incident, her voice low so the children wouldn't hear. You're stalking us, Dante. Leave us alone or I'll call the police. I'm in a public place. His response was calm, practiced, probably vetted by lawyers. I'm not threatening you. I'm not approaching the children without permission. I'm just existing in the same town. Why? Isabel demanded, her control fracturing. Why now? Why show up after 3 years of silence and think you have any right to disrupt our lives? Dante's face cracked, genuine emotion breaking through the corporate mask. Because I made the worst mistake of my life. Because I see them and I see everything I threw away. Because I want to know my children, Isabel. I want a chance to be their father. You're not their father. The words came out vicious, designed to wound. You're a sperm donor who tried to pay me to abort them. Biology doesn't make you a parent. Showing up doesn't erase 3 years of abandonment. I know that. Dante's hands clenched at his sides. I know I have no rights. I know I destroyed any claim when I gave you that envelope. But I'm asking for grace, Isabel. I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm different than the man who hurt you. Isabel wanted to laugh at his audacity, his assumption that he could show up and demand forgiveness, that his regret somehow entitled him to access. You don't get to decide when you're ready to be a father, Dante. You don't get to discard them when they're inconvenient and then claim them when you're having some midlife crisis about meaning and legacy. It's not about legacy. Dante stepped closer, and Isabel instinctively moved back. It's about them. About seeing Matteo's determination, Sophia's talent, Gabriel's kindness, and knowing that I helped create something beautiful and I walked away from it. Let me prove I can be what they need. Let me try. The sincerity in his voice was almost convincing, almost enough to crack her defenses. But Isabel had survived by trusting her instincts, and every instinct screamed that letting Dante into their lives would end in disaster. No. She gathered Matteo and Sophia, called for Gabriel. Stay away from us, Dante. Go back to your fiancé, your company, your perfect life. We don't need you. But he kept coming back, kept showing up, kept pushing against her boundaries with the relentless determination of someone who had never been told no and actually accepted it. He brought expensive toys the children were too young to appreciate, offered to pay for things Isabel explicitly refused, talked about opportunities his money could provide while completely missing that they didn't need his wealth. They needed stability, consistency, a father who wouldn't leave when things got hard. Miguel watched this campaign with troubled eyes, seeing both Dante's desperation and Isabel's rigid fury, wondering if stubbornness was serving anyone or just satisfying the need for revenge. He's trying, Izzy. Miguel's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not saying forgive him. I'm not saying trust him. But maybe let him prove himself before you cut him off completely. He'll leave again. Isabel's voice was flat, certain. He'll realize how hard this actually is, how boring and exhausting and thankless parenting can be, and he'll go back to his empire and his important meetings. I'm protecting them from that disappointment. Or you're punishing him by using them as weapons. Miguel's words were sharp. I see what he did to you, sis. I see the damage. But those children deserve to know their father if he's genuinely trying to be present. Isabel wanted to argue, but doubt had started creeping in. Small questions about whether her protection was actually fear, whether keeping Dante away served her children or just satisfied her need for control. The breaking point came suddenly, violently, on a day that started normally and became a nightmare. Sophia spiked a fever that climbed so fast Isabel barely had time to panic before they were rushing to the hospital, the child's small body burning like she was on fire, her eyes unfocused, her breathing shallow. Isabel drove with Matteo and Gabriel screaming in the back seat, terror making her hands shake on the wheel. Dante was there, had apparently been following them to the market, and he saw their frantic departure and followed. Isabel wanted to tell him to leave, to stay out of this crisis, but Sophia was being rushed inside and Matteo and Gabriel were dissolving into panic and she couldn't manage everything at once. Let me help. Dante's voice was steady, calm in the chaos. Please. Let me take care of them while you focus on Sophia. Isabel should have refused, should have handled it alone the way she had handled everything for 3 years. But she was terrified and exhausted and her daughter's life might be in danger, so she nodded. For 6 hours, Dante sat in the waiting room with Matteo and Gabriel, reading them stories from books he bought in the gift shop, distracting them with games and snacks, answering their frightened questions about their sister with reassurances he had no right to make but that somehow helped. Isabel checked on them between updates from doctors, seeing her children curled against this stranger, accepting his comfort with the easy trust of children who didn't know about betrayal. When the doctors finally stabilized Sophia and released her with antibiotics for a severe infection, Isabel found Matteo and Gabriel asleep in Dante's arms, his expensive suit covered in chocolate stains and tears, his face exhausted but peaceful in a way she had never seen. "Thank you." The words cost her something, an admission that he had helped, that he could be useful, that maybe he wasn't entirely the monster she had built him into. Dante looked up at her, careful not to wake the sleeping children. "Can we talk? Just 5 minutes. Please." Isabel was too tired to fight, too emotionally wrecked to maintain her walls. So she sat down, keeping distance between them, waiting for whatever he wanted to say. "I was wrong." Dante's voice was rough, raw. "About everything. About you, about the children, about what mattered. I don't expect you to forgive me, Isabel. I don't even expect you to believe that I've changed. But I'm asking for a chance to prove it, to show you that I'm serious about being their father, that this isn't some temporary guilt or midlife crisis. Why should I believe you won't leave again?" Isabel's exhaustion made her honest. "Why should I risk their hearts on your redemption arc?" "Because I have nothing else." Dante's confession was devastating in its simplicity. "My engagement is a business arrangement. My career feels empty. My entire life is a performance for people whose approval means nothing. Those children are the only real thing I've ever created, and I threw them away because I was too much of a coward to choose authenticity over expectation. Let me prove I'm different now. Let me try to be what they need." Isabel looked at him, really looked, and saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine regret, yes, but underneath it was transformation, the kind that comes from facing who you were and hating what you see. She thought about her children sleeping in his arms, about how Gabriel had stopped crying when Dante told him stories, about how even Matteo had relaxed into his presence. Supervised visits. The words came out before she fully decided. "Twice a week at my house with me present. You follow my rules completely. You don't make promises you can't keep. You don't bring expensive gifts. You don't talk about your money or what you can provide. You just show up, be present, and we'll see if you can actually do this." Dante's face transformed, hope lighting features that had been carved with grief. "I won't let you down. You already have." Isabel's voice was hard, protecting herself from the vulnerability of this choice. "This is about them, not you. The moment you prove me right about you being temporary, you're gone forever. Understand?" "I understand." Isabel didn't believe him, didn't trust him, but she was too tired to fight anymore, too aware that maybe keeping them apart was serving her anger more than their well-being. She had made her choice, opened a door she couldn't easily close, and now she would have to live with whatever came next, whether it was healing or just a new way to break. Dante's first official visit was excruciating for everyone involved. The triplets treating him like a dangerous intruder, Isabel hovering like a hawk protecting her nest, Dante himself fumbling through every interaction with painful awkwardness. He arrived exactly on time with nothing but himself, following Isabel's rules to the letter, and sat on the floor where she directed him, waiting for the children to decide if he was worth their attention. Matteo approached first, his boldness masking suspicion, standing directly in front of him with his hands on his hips. "Mama says you want to know us. Why didn't you want to know us before?" The question was brutal in its simplicity, and Dante had no good answer, nothing that would make sense to a child, no way to explain cowardice and fear and choosing safety over courage. "I made a terrible mistake. I was scared of being a father because I thought I wouldn't be good at it. I was wrong to let fear make my decisions. Are you still scared?" Matteo's eyes were relentless, demanding truth. Terrified. Dante's honesty seemed to satisfy him more than a comfortable lie would have. "But I'm trying anyway." Sophia ignored him completely, sitting in her corner with her drawing supplies, occasionally glancing up to study him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. Her silence was more unnerving than Matteo's interrogation, her judgment withheld but absolute. Gabriel was the one who broke the standoff, climbing into Dante's lap after 20 minutes with the easy affection of a child who loved indiscriminately. "Do you want to see my rock collection? They have names and stories and everything." Dante felt something crack open in his chest as Gabriel settled against him, small and warm and trusting in ways Dante didn't deserve. The child launched into complicated explanations about his rocks, assigning elaborate mythologies to ordinary stones, and Dante listened with an intensity that had nothing to do with rocks and everything to do with drinking in every detail of this person he had helped create. The visits became routine over the following months, Dante showing up exactly when promised, never pushing for more than Isabel allowed, slowly earning microscopic increments of trust. He learned that Matteo needed logical explanations and firm boundaries, that he respected honesty even when it was uncomfortable. He discovered that Sophia responded to art supplies and quiet presence, that she would gradually warm if he didn't push, if he let her set the pace. Gabriel was the easiest and the hardest, eager for connection but also sensitive enough to pick up on every tension between the adults, his joy dimming when Isabel and Dante exchanged sharp words or loaded silences. Dante started bringing sketch paper for Sophia, chapter books for Matteo, patience for Gabriel, learning their languages slowly and imperfectly. He made constant mistakes, panicking when they cried, not understanding why a broken cracker could cause a meltdown, struggling with the chaos and noise and irrational demands of small humans. Isabel watched him fail repeatedly, waiting for him to give up, to realize this was too hard, that the performance wasn't worth the effort. But he kept coming back, kept trying, kept asking how to do better. Something unexpected was happening though, something Isabel hadn't anticipated. Dante was changing in ways that seemed to terrify him, his carefully constructed life crumbling as his priorities shifted without permission. He started leaving work early, missing meetings, letting calls go to voicemail during visits. The corporate warrior who had once chosen empire over everything was suddenly choosing differently. Valentina noticed and didn't care, showing up at Dante's penthouse with cold efficiency. "I know about the children. I've always known you were keeping secrets." "I don't care, Dante, as long as you're discreet and don't embarrass the family name." "I'm done being discreet." Dante's words were not planned but felt inevitable. "I'm done pretending this engagement is anything but a contract. I'm done living a lie." Valentina's laugh was sharp and cruel. "You think you're going to play house with your working-class ex and her children? You think you'll be happy on some farm pretending to be normal? You'll hate it within a year. You'll miss the power, the influence, the life you're throwing away for some fantasy." "Maybe," Dante met her eyes without flinching, "but at least it will be real." He ended the engagement with terms so generous that Valentina's lawyers couldn't believe their fortune. Dante was bleeding his accounts, setting her up to maintain her lifestyle without him, essentially paying for his freedom. His business partners threatened to force him out of the company he had built, to destroy his reputation, to make him a cautionary tale about men who let emotion override logic. But Dante discovered he didn't care about threats anymore, didn't care about legacy or power or anything except earning a place in his children's lives. Isabel watched these upheavals with deep suspicion, certain this was temporary insanity, convinced Dante would wake up one day and regret burning down his life for children he barely knew. Miguel kept telling her to give him credit, to acknowledge that destroying your entire existence proved commitment. But Isabel had been betrayed too thoroughly to believe in transformation. Then Valentina showed up at the farm, elegant and furious and crackling with malice. "I know what you're doing." Her voice was ice. "Seducing my fiancé with your children, playing on his guilt to trap him into playing father. It's pathetic, and it's going to stop." Isabel stood in her doorway, deliberately not inviting this woman inside, recognizing the threat immediately. Dante made his own choices. "I never asked him to come back. I never wanted him in our lives." "I don't believe you." Valentina's eyes were cold, calculating. "Women like you see men like Dante and see dollar signs, opportunity, a way out of your little poverty existence. But let me be very clear, if you continue this arrangement, if you keep allowing him to play house with your children, I will make your life a nightmare. I have resources you can't imagine, connections that will bury you, and I will paint you as a gold digger who trapped a billionaire. Get off my property." Isabel's voice was steady despite the rage shaking her bones. "Whatever issues you have are with Dante, not with me. I didn't destroy your engagement. He did that himself." Valentina left with a final warning, and Isabel stood there shaking, understanding that she had been naive to think they could exist outside Dante's toxic world, that his sphere of influence extended further than she had imagined. When Dante arrived for his next scheduled visit, Isabel met him outside, not letting him in, her face hard with decision. This needs to stop. Your ex-fiancé was here making threats. Your business partners probably hate us. Your whole world is falling apart because you suddenly decided you want to be a father. I can't do this, Dante. I can't be responsible for destroying your life. You're not destroying anything. Dante's face was desperate, frightened. I'm finally building something real. Let me prove it, Isabel. Let me show you this isn't temporary. No. The word was final, absolute. Go back to your life. Work things out with Valentina. Save your company. The children are getting attached, and when you inevitably leave, it will devastate them. I'm protecting them from that pain. I'm not leaving. Dante's voice cracked. I've ended my engagement. I've stepped back from the company. I'm moving here permanently. I'm doing everything you said I wouldn't do, everything that proves I'm serious. You're having a breakdown. Isabel's words were cruel but necessary. You're going to regret this, Dante. You're going to wake up one day and resent me for letting you throw your life away. I won't do that to you or to my children. This was a mistake. We're done. She walked inside and closed the door, leaving Dante standing on her porch, understanding that she had made her decision, that her walls were back up and reinforced, that saving them from future pain meant causing present pain. And maybe she was right. But it didn't make it hurt any less. Dante refused to accept Isabel's decision, showing up at the farm every day despite explicit instructions to stay away, leaving notes when she wouldn't answer the door, calling from different numbers when she blocked his phone. His desperation was suffocating. His inability to accept rejection proving exactly what Isabel feared about entitled men who had never been told no. You're harassing us. Isabel finally confronted him on her porch, fury overriding fear. Leave, Dante. Leave us alone or I'm filing for a restraining order. I'll fight you in court then. Dante's mask finally slipped, revealing the ruthless corporate warrior underneath the reformed father act. I have rights, Isabel. I'm their biological father. I can demand paternity tests, force custody arrangements, make your life hell through legal channels you can't afford to fight. There it is. Isabel's laugh was bitter, vindicated. The real Dante Castellano, threatening to use his wealth and power to take what he wants because he's never learned how to accept losing. This is why I said no, Dante. Because I knew the mask would fall eventually. Dante's face crumbled, horror replacing anger. I didn't mean that. I'm just terrified of losing them, of losing this chance. Please, Isabel. I'll do anything. You can't buy your way into our lives. Isabel's voice was ice. You can't threaten your way in either. You had 3 months to prove you were different, and at the first real obstacle, you showed me exactly who you are. We're done. Stay away from my children. She went inside and locked the door, listening to him pound and plead and finally leave, his car engine fading into distance. Isabel slid down the wall, exhausted and vindicated and heartbroken all at once, knowing she had been right not to trust him, knowing she had saved her children from future devastation, hating how much it hurt anyway. The children sensed the shift immediately, asking where Mr. Dante was, why he didn't visit anymore, if they had done something to make him leave. Isabel tried to explain that sometimes adults made things complicated, that it wasn't their fault, that they were loved and safe. But her explanations felt hollow even to herself. Mateo became aggressive at preschool, pushing other children when they got too close, testing every boundary with violent determination. Sophia stopped drawing for a week, just sat in her corner staring at nothing, her silence more terrifying than any tantrum. Gabriel cried every night, calling for Mr. Dante with a desperation that shattered Isabel's heart into smaller and smaller pieces. You're hurting them to punish him. Miguel didn't hide his disappointment. I watched him, Izzy. I saw genuine change. I saw a man facing his demons and trying to be better. You cut him off at the first sign of weakness instead of letting him prove he could recover from mistakes. He threatened to take them from me. Isabel's voice was hollow. He showed his true colors. I was protecting them. You were protecting yourself. Miguel's words were gentle but devastating. From the possibility that he might be real, that you might have to forgive him, that your anger has been the shield keeping you safe, and without it you'd have to risk getting hurt again. Isabel wanted to argue but couldn't find words, just sat with her brother's accusation, wondering if stubbornness and self-protection had become indistinguishable, if her walls were keeping danger out or just keeping love locked inside with nowhere to go. Dante was destroying his life with methodical precision, burning every bridge, severing every tie to his old existence. The break with Valentina finalized with shocking speed, her lawyers thrilled by the settlement that left her wealthy and free. His business partners forced him out of Castellano Industries with terms that stripped him of control but left him with enough wealth to live comfortably without working. He bought a small house 3 miles from Isabel's farm, sold most of his possessions, started a consulting business that gave him flexibility and independence but nothing like his previous wealth or power. His former colleagues whispered about his breakdown. His social circle evaporated like morning fog. His entire world contracted to this small town where he watched his children from a distance like a ghost observing the living. He saw them at the market, at the library, at the park, always careful to stay far enough away that Isabel couldn't accuse him of harassment, close enough that he could see their faces, hear their laughter, witness the life he had chosen too late to join. His mother's sister, Aunt Clarissa, sent him a letter, warm and understanding, telling him she was proud of him for choosing authenticity over appearance, for learning that love was more valuable than power, for becoming someone his mother would have been proud of. Her blessing meant everything and nothing, validation coming from someone who understood, but unable to undo the damage already done. The months passed slowly, painfully. Dante existing in his small house, doing his consulting work, watching his children grow from a distance while their mother rebuilt the walls he had briefly breached. He wrote letters to Matteo, Sofia, and Gabriel that he never sent, apologies and explanations and love confessions that would sit in a drawer until they were old enough to maybe understand. He had given up everything for a chance at redemption, had burned his entire life down for the possibility of earning forgiveness, and Isabel had rejected him anyway, had proven that some betrayals were too deep to heal, that wanting to change wasn't the same as deserving absolution. Late one night, unable to sleep, Dante walked to the field behind his house where he could see the stars unobscured by city lights, sitting in the grass and staring at a universe that offered no answers. He was so lost in grief that he didn't notice Isabel approaching until she was there, sitting beside him with enough distance that they weren't touching, both of them existing in silence while crickets sang and the night air carried the scent of earth and growing things. "I'm leaving." Dante's voice was rough, defeated. "Moving back to the city. Not because I'm giving up, but because staying here is hurting you, trapping you in the past, preventing you from moving forward. I've set up trust funds for all 3 children. I've signed papers giving you full custody with no interference from me. I've written them letters explaining everything, apologizing for everything, hoping they'll understand one day that my absence is love, not abandonment." Isabel listened to this goodbye and felt something unexpected crack inside her chest. Not relief, but grief, the satisfaction she thought she would feel at his departure replaced by a loss she didn't want to examine. "Why are you really leaving?" "Because I love them too much to keep hurting them." Dante's confession was raw and honest. "Because every time Gabriel cries for me, every time Matteo asks why I left, every time Sophia's drawings get darker, I'm reminded that I'm causing damage just by existing in their orbit. You were right about me, Isabel. I'm not capable of being what they need. Walking away is the only decent thing I can do." Isabel looked at him, really looked, seeing exhaustion and devastation and genuine transformation carved into features that used to be arrogant and cold. She thought about her children asking for him, about how their joy had increased when he was present, about the difference between protecting them from disappointment and teaching them that people could change, that second chances weren't always naive, that forgiveness required courage. "Stay." The word came out before she fully decided. "Not because I forgive you, not because I trust you, but because they need to know their father, and you're trying to be him. Real trying, not performance. If you're serious about this, prove it. Not with grand gestures or sacrifices, but with consistency. Show up when it's boring, when it's hard, when there's no reward except their presence. Earn your place one day at a time." Dante's face transformed, hope and terror mixing into something desperate and fragile. "I won't disappoint you again. You already have." Isabel's voice was hard, protecting herself from the vulnerability of this choice. The question is whether you'll keep disappointing or whether you'll actually become someone worthy of their love. I guess we're about to find out. Dante moved into the small house 3 miles away. This proximity both comfort and constant reminder of how fragile his second chance was. Isabel's new rules were brutal in their specificity. Scheduled visits with rigid time limits, no spontaneous drop-ins, no gifts without explicit permission, no promises to the children that hadn't been vetted and approved, essentially putting him on permanent probation where one mistake meant exile. He accepted every condition without argument, understanding that trust had to be measured in millimeters, earned through relentless consistency rather than dramatic gestures. The triplets' reaction to his return was complicated in ways that broke his heart. Matteo was suspicious and withholding, making him work for every smile, every conversation, every acknowledgement that he existed. Sophia was cautiously warming, allowing him into her space incrementally, testing whether he would stay this time or disappear again when things got difficult. Gabriel was immediately attached, crawling into Dante's lap the moment he arrived like no time had passed, his forgiveness instantaneous and terrifying in its completeness. Dante showed up exactly when Isabel said he could, stayed exactly as long as permitted, followed every rule with such careful precision that it sometimes felt absurd. But he understood that reliability was the foundation everything else would be built on. He learned to navigate meltdowns without panicking, to cook meals they would actually eat instead of what he thought they should eat, to set boundaries when they pushed instead of giving in to avoid conflict. He was terrible at first, bribing them with sugar when he should have been firm, saying yes to everything because he was terrified of them hating him, making mistakes that Isabel corrected with sharp words and barely concealed frustration. But he learned from every failure, asked questions without defensiveness, accepted criticism as the price of admission. Isabel watched this transformation with guarded hope, waiting for the moment when Dante would realize how hard parenting actually was and retreat to easier options. But months passed and he kept showing up, kept trying, kept choosing them even when visits were boring or exhausting or thankless, even when there was no reward except their presence. Miguel became Dante's unexpected ally, teaching him how to fix things around the farm, explaining the children's personalities in ways that helped him understand their needs, giving him wisdom about patience and persistence that Dante's own father had never offered. The house 3 miles away slowly transformed into a second home for the triplets, filled with their drawings and toys and evidence of existence, Dante's formerly pristine space becoming beautifully chaotic. Isabel found herself softening incrementally, allowing longer visits, trusting him with solo time while she ran errands, seeing him as a partner rather than a threat. They developed a co-parenting relationship that was professional and distant but functional, both of them prioritizing the children's needs over their complicated feelings, both of them careful not to acknowledge the attraction that occasionally flickered between them like a dangerous spark. Then Dante's aunt died suddenly, the one who had supported his transformation, and he had to return to the city for the funeral. He asked Isabel if he could take the children with him, to meet their family, to understand where they came from even if that history was complicated. Isabel's instinct was to refuse, to keep them away from the toxicity of Dante's world. But she saw genuine grief in his eyes mixed with a desire to share something real with them, so she agreed to a weekend trip with strict conditions about supervision and safety. The city felt different to Isabel this time, less threatening now that she had built a life beyond it, less capable of defining her worth. Dante's family home was exactly what she expected. Massive and cold and full of expensive things that weren't meant to be touched, museum-perfect and utterly lifeless. But his younger cousin, Raphael, was a revelation, a man who had rejected the family business to become a teacher, who looked at the triplets with immediate warmth and got down on their level to introduce himself properly. "I've been waiting to meet you." Raphael's voice was soft, full of wonder. "I've been hoping Dante would do the right thing, and here you are. Here you finally are." The funeral was difficult, Dante facing family members who whispered about his choices, their judgment obvious even when they tried to hide it. But Raphael stood beside him with quiet support, introduced the triplets as his cousins without qualification or apology, his defiance making clear that anyone who had a problem could leave. Isabel saw Dante in the context of his family's damage and understood things she hadn't before. How his father's cruelty had shaped him, how his mother's early death had left him vulnerable, how he had been trained from birth to value appearance over authenticity. The knowledge didn't erase his betrayal but added context, complicated the narrative she had been telling herself about his character. On the last night, after the children were asleep in their temporary rooms, Dante and Isabel sat in the library where family portraits hung like accusations, this full-circle moment heavy with meaning and unspoken emotions. My aunt died believing I could be better than my father. Dante's voice was hollow. Her last words were about how proud she was that I chose love over legacy. She died thinking I had figured it out. I'm sorry. Isabel meant it, recognizing that complicated grief was still grief, that losing someone who believed in you carried its own specific pain. I'm not. Dante's confession was quiet but certain. Her death reminded me why I'm doing this. Why I can't go back to being the man I was. I'm finally free to just be myself, whoever that is. Isabel looked at him, seeing exhaustion and relief and something that might have been peace, understanding that transformation was possible even for people raised in toxicity, that choosing to be different than your family was its own form of courage. You've done well with them. The admission cost her something. The children love you, Dante. Not as an idea or because of what you can provide, but because you show up. Because you're present. Because you're trying to be what they need. I'm trying to be what you taught me they needed. Dante met her eyes. You're an incredible mother, Isabel. You saved them when I tried to destroy them. You built a life for them when I offered you nothing. Everything good in them comes from you. The moment stretched between them, loaded with things neither was ready to say, both of them aware that something was shifting, that whatever this co-parenting arrangement had become was evolving into something more complicated and dangerous. Dante leaned forward, his intention clear, giving Isabel time to pull away, to stop this before it started. She should have retreated, should have maintained her boundaries, should have remembered that mixing passion with their fragile partnership could destroy everything. Instead, she kissed him, fierce and desperate and full of 3 years of rage and grief and unwanted longing. Dante responded with equal intensity, his hands in her hair, their bodies remembering what their minds had tried to forget, passion and pain so tangled they were indistinguishable. Isabel pulled away first, gasping, horrified at herself, understanding that she had just complicated everything irreparably. This was a mistake. I know. Dante's voice was rough, his eyes dark with want and confusion and fear. They sat in silence, both terrified of what had just happened, both knowing that crossing this line changed everything, neither ready to examine what it meant or where it led, the weight of their choices pressing down like physical force. The kiss in the library became the earthquake neither of them acknowledged, but both felt constantly, shifting the ground beneath their carefully constructed co-parenting arrangement. Isabel retreated immediately after returning home, imposing distance again, terrified that her body's memory of loving him would override her brain's memory of betrayal, that physical desire would trick her into vulnerability. Dante respected her space but started writing letters, old-fashioned handwritten pages that arrived daily, not asking for anything but just sharing thoughts, progress, fears, gratitude. He wrote about therapy sessions where he was unpacking his father's damage, about realizing he had been running from intimacy his entire life because vulnerability felt like weakness, about understanding that Isabel and the children represented everything real he had been conditioned to fear. Isabel read these letters late at night after the triplets were asleep, recognizing vulnerability and authenticity she had never seen in him before, watching through his words as he did the difficult work of actually changing instead of just performing change. Her walls began to crack incrementally, small fissures that let in light and possibility and terrifying hope. Raphael became an unexpected presence in their lives, visiting monthly, showering the triplets with attention while respecting Isabel's authority, teaching them about their heritage and the responsibility that came with family. He apologized repeatedly for not protecting Dante from his father, for failing to intervene when his cousin was being molded into someone incapable of authentic connection. I was young and scared. Raphael's confession was heavy with regret. I watched my uncle destroy Dante's capacity for love because I was too afraid to stand up to him. I can't undo that damage, but I can try to be present for my cousins now, to give them what I failed to give Dante. Isabel found herself warming to this man who had every reason to distance himself but instead embraced them with genuine devotion, who defied his own family to claim these children as blood, who proved that transformation was possible even for people raised in privilege. Months passed with agonizing slowness, each day another test of whether Dante would maintain his consistency or revert to old patterns. He showed up for every scheduled visit, never missed a commitment, never made excuses when things got difficult. He learned to braid Sophia's hair after weeks of YouTube tutorials, figured out how to soothe Matteo's anxiety without words, became Gabriel's safe place when the world felt too big and scary. Matteo started calling him Dad 8 months after his return, not because anyone pushed him, but because he decided Dante had earned it, his approval the hardest won and most meaningful. The first time he used the word, Dante's face crumbled, tears streaming down his cheeks, his gratitude and disbelief so raw that Isabel had to look away from the intimacy of it. Sophia created a family portrait that included everyone, Isabel and Dante and all 3 children and Uncle Miguel and cousin Raphael, a vision of family that existed in her imagination but was slowly becoming real. She gave it to Dante during a visit, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction, and when he hung it on his refrigerator with reverence, treating it like precious art, she smiled for the first time in his presence. Gabriel told everyone at preschool about his dad who was lost but came back, a simple child's narrative that somehow captured the complexity better than any adult explanation. Teachers mentioned it to Isabel with concern, making sure she was safe, that this wasn't a dangerous situation, and Isabel found herself defending Dante, explaining that he was genuinely present, genuinely trying, genuinely transformed. Isabel watched her children fall in love with their father and felt her own resistance crumbling, understanding that forgiveness wasn't a single decision but a series of choices, a daily practice of releasing resentment and choosing connection. Dante proved himself through consistency rather than grand gestures, showing up for doctor's appointments and preschool events and midnight crises, becoming the kind of father Isabel had once dreamed he could be but never expected to actually see. One evening, after a particularly chaotic dinner where Sophia spilled juice everywhere, Gabriel had a meltdown about bedtime routines, and Matteo declared he hated vegetables. Dante helped Isabel clean the kitchen in comfortable silence. They worked around each other with practiced ease, their movements synchronized from months of shared parenting, and Isabel realized this felt like partnership, like family, like something she had given up believing was possible. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Dante's voice was quiet, careful not to break the moment's peace. "Thank you for believing I could change, even when I didn't believe it myself." Isabel looked at him, this man who had broken her and rebuilt himself, who had chosen them over everything else, who had learned that love was sacrifice and presence and showing up even when it was boring and thankless. "You earned it, Dante. You're earning it every day." The kiss happened gradually this time, not explosive passion but tender connection, both of them moving toward each other with intention and fear and hope. Dante cupped her face like she was something precious, his touch gentle and questioning, and Isabel leaned into it, accepting what she had been fighting for months. "I love you." Dante's confession was simple, no qualifications or conditions. "I never stopped loving you, Isabel. I was just too broken to know how to love you the right way. Let me try again. Let me show you I can be what you deserve." Isabel wanted to protect herself, to remind him of betrayal, to keep walls up for safety. But she was exhausted from fighting, tired of letting fear make her decisions. "If we do this, it's forever, Dante. No running when it gets hard. No choosing career over family. No going back to being the man who threw us away. Forever or nothing. Forever." Dante's promise was absolute. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving I mean it." They kissed again, deeper this time, 3 years of longing and rage and grief and hope tangled together, both of them understanding they were choosing something terrifying and beautiful, both of them ready to risk everything for the possibility of being whole. The proposal came months later, not in a restaurant or public spectacle, but in Isabel's kitchen after another chaotic dinner, Dante getting on his knee among the mess and chaos, holding a ring that was beautiful but not ostentatious. "Marry me. Not because the children need it, not because it makes sense practically, but because I love you, because you're my home, because I want to spend my life earning your trust and your love." Isabel looked at this man who had destroyed her and rebuilt himself, who had chosen them over empire, who had learned that love was work and sacrifice and showing up every single day. Yes. The wedding was small and intimate, just family and close friends at the farm where everything had begun to heal. Raphael cried throughout the ceremony, Miguel beamed with pride. The triplets served as chaotic wedding party members who stole every moment and made everything perfect in their imperfection. Dante adopted all 3 children legally, making official what had become true through time and effort and relentless consistency. Matteo Castellano, Sofia Castellano, Gabriel Castellano, 3 children born from betrayal who became proof that transformation was possible, that forgiveness could heal wounds that should have been fatal. Isabel kept her name as Rivera Castellano, a hyphenation that represented her refusal to be absorbed, her insistence on maintaining identity within partnership. They bought a house together, merged their lives, became partners and lovers and parents, building something real from the ruins of what had been destroyed. The children grew up knowing their story, the difficult parts and the healing parts, understanding that their father had failed but chose to become better, that their mother's strength had saved them all, that family was something you chose every day through action rather than just biology. Years later, Isabel would look at her family and remember that envelope on the marble countertop, those dollars that were supposed to erase them, and feel gratitude for her younger self who chose courage, who believed 3 heartbeats were worth fighting for when the world said they weren't. The field stretched endlessly before them, golden wheat catching afternoon sun and transforming ordinary landscape into something luminous. Isabel stood with Dante's arm around her waist, watching their 5-year-old triplets race through the rows with fearless joy, their laughter carrying on summer wind that smelled of earth and growing things and second chances. Matteo was building an elaborate fort, ordering his siblings around with the confidence of someone who knew his own mind completely. His voice carrying authority that made Isabel smile because that determination came directly from her, from survival, from refusing to be diminished. Sophia collected wildflowers with artistic precision, arranging them in patterns only she understood, her concentration absolute as she created beauty from scattered fragments. Gabriel chased butterflies with abandon, shrieking with delight when one landed on his outstretched finger, his joy infectious and pure and uncomplicated by the weight of history that his parents carried. "I never thought this was possible." Dante's voice was quiet, reverent, thick with emotions he no longer tried to hide. "I thought I had destroyed any chance at this kind of happiness. I thought that envelope, those words, that moment in the penthouse had sealed my fate as someone who would never deserve this." Isabel leaned into him, comfortable in his presence in ways she never imagined feeling again after that night when her world shattered. "You almost did. You came within a breath of losing everything that mattered. If you had pushed one day longer, if you had made one more threat, if you had shown up with lawyers instead of humility, we wouldn't be here." "I know." Dante kissed her temple, his gratitude evident in every gesture, every touch, every moment he held her like she was something precious he couldn't believe he was allowed to keep. "Thank you, Isabel. Thank you for giving me a chance to be worthy of you, of them. Thank you for seeing past who I was to who I could become. Thank you for being brave enough to risk your heart again when I had already broken it once." Raphael appeared beside them, his own eyes wet, watching his cousins play, his transformation from distant family member to devoted uncle complete and beautiful in its authenticity. He had left his teaching position in the city to work at the local school, moved to be near them, rebuilt his life around what actually mattered instead of what looked impressive. "They're beautiful." Raphael's voice carried wonder and pride. "You built something extraordinary from very broken pieces. You took devastation and turned it into this, into them, into a family that shouldn't exist but does because you both refused to give up." Isabel smiled, recognizing truth in those words, feeling the weight of their journey settle into something lighter, something that felt less like burden and more like triumph. Their family was unconventional, born from betrayal and rebuilt through forgiveness. Messy and imperfect and absolutely real in ways that polished perfection could never achieve. Dante had done the brutal work of transformation, had faced his demons and changed fundamentally, had torn down everything he thought defined him to discover who he actually was underneath the performance. But Isabel had done equally hard work, learning to trust again after trust was shattered, to forgive without forgetting, to allow love after devastation had taught her that love was dangerous. Miguel joined them, his presence solid and comforting, carrying the cooler filled with snacks and drinks and all the practical things that made family outings possible. He had been their anchor through every storm, the one who held them together when they were falling apart, who believed in second chances when Isabel wanted to build walls forever. He caught Isabel's eye and smiled, that knowing smile that said he had always known this was how the story would end, that love was more powerful than hurt when people were willing to do the work. Gabriel ran toward them suddenly, covered in dust and clutching a handful of crushed flowers, launching himself into Dante's arms with complete confidence that he would be caught, that his father would always be there to catch him. Dante held him close, pressing kisses to dusty curls, his love uncomplicated and absolute, his gratitude for this trust evident in the way his hands trembled slightly as he held his son. Matteo followed, demanding attention with the imperious tone of someone who knew he was adored, wanting his parents to see his architectural achievement, to witness his creation. Sophia came last, clutching wildflowers she wanted to show her mother, her quiet voice describing the patterns she saw, the stories each flower contained, the universe she found in small beautiful things. Isabel gathered them all close, her heart full enough to hurt, understanding that this moment was what she had fought for during those desperate early days when she didn't know how she would survive, what she had chosen when she walked away from Dante's envelope, what she had built through exhaustion and determination and refusal to let his rejection define their worth. "Tell us the story again," Matteo demanded, nestled against Isabel's side. "The one about when we were born." Isabel exchanged glances with Dante, seeing the same mix of pain and joy reflected in his eyes, both of them understanding that their children deserved truth, even uncomfortable truth. "You were born during a blizzard," Isabel began, her voice soft but steady. "The snow was falling so hard the world turned white, and I was scared because you came early, because I didn't know if I was strong enough to be your mother. But you were fighters, all three of you. You were strong." Sophia's voice was certain, absolute. "You're the strongest person in the world." "I had to be," Isabel kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Because you three were worth being strong for. You were worth everything I gave up, everything I survived, everything I fought through. You were worth choosing when the world said I should choose differently." Dante's arm tightened around her waist, his silent acknowledgement of the pain he had caused, the choice he had tried to steal from her, the future he had almost destroyed. The children didn't need to know those details yet, didn't need to carry the weight of their father's worst moment. But someday they would know the whole story, and Isabel trusted they would understand. That people could change, that transformation was real, that forgiveness was possible even after devastating betrayal. "I love you," Dante whispered it like prayer, like promise, like the most important truth he had ever spoken. "All of you. Completely. Forever. With everything I am and everything I'm still becoming." Isabel looked at him. This man who had been her greatest pain and was now her deepest joy, who had destroyed her and then spent years rebuilding both of them with patience and humility and relentless consistency. She saw the silver threading through his hair, the lines around his eyes from laughing with their children, the softness in his expression that came from finally living authentically instead of performing for audiences who didn't matter. He was beautiful in his imperfection, in his hard-won transformation, in his daily choice to be present even when presence was difficult. "We love you too." Isabel's voice was steady, certain, carrying none of the hesitation that used to color every interaction. "Forever and always. Through whatever comes next, through every challenge and every joy. We're a family, Dante. Not because biology made us one, but because we chose each other. Because we built this through blood and tears and refusing to give up on what mattered." The sun began setting, painting the sky in colors that defied description. Deep purples bleeding into oranges and pinks and golds that looked like the universe was celebrating with them. Isabel understood in her bones that this wasn't a fairy tale ending but a real beginning, the start of building a life rather than the conclusion of a story. There would be hard days ahead, challenges and conflicts and moments when old wounds reopened just to remind them they existed. But they would face everything together. As partners, as family, as people who had learned that love was a choice made daily rather than a feeling that sustained itself without effort. The triplets ran back into the fields, their voices blending with wind, their joy uncomplicated and perfect and everything Isabel had fought to give them. She followed, pulling Dante with her, Miguel and Raphael joining them, all of them walking into the golden light together, their laughter rising above the sound of rustling wheat, their family expanding to hold everyone who chose love over judgment, presence over perfection. Isabel looked back at the path behind them, at the footprints they had left in the soft earth, evidence of their presence, proof of their existence, marks that would fade with time but would be made again tomorrow and the day after that and every day they chose to show up. She thought about the girl who had walked out of that penthouse kitchen with nothing but heartbreak and determination, who had chosen life when erasure would have been easier, who had built miracles from devastation. "Thank you," Dante's voice was rough with emotion, his eyes on their children playing in the golden light. "For not giving up on me when I had already given up on myself. For seeing something worth saving when I thought I was beyond redemption. For teaching me that love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up, it's about choosing someone even when they don't deserve it, it's about building something beautiful from broken pieces." Isabel turned to face him fully, wheat swaying around their legs, the sunset painting them both in shades of gold and possibility. "You taught me something too, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but it does mean releasing the weight of anger because carrying it was destroying me. That transformation is possible when someone is willing to do the brutal work of changing. That second chances are terrifying and beautiful and sometimes the bravest thing we can do." They kissed, soft and sweet and full of promise. While their children played nearby and the people who loved them watched with tears and smiles, all of them bearing witness to this family that shouldn't exist but does, that was born from the worst betrayal and became the most beautiful redemption. This was their proof that transformation was possible, that forgiveness could heal wounds that should have been fatal, that some mistakes became the foundation for something stronger than what existed before. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth every difficult moment, every tear shed, every wall torn down, every choice to be vulnerable when safety would have been simpler. Not the end, but the beginning of everything that mattered, everything that was worth fighting for, everything that made life more than just survival but actually worth living. The fields kept growing, steady and eternal, and Isabel understood that their love would be like that, constant through storms and calm alike, present through devastation and joy, choosing each other every single day until the last breath left their bodies and beyond into whatever came next. Forever and always, exactly as they had promised.